maxillary. Then we have the pterygoid canal. And the most important for you is what happens here in the bottom, in the hard palate, because both greater and lesser palatine foramina, they lead to specific canals which join together, forming so-called pterygopalatine canal that opens into this pterygopalatine fossa. So bad administration of the anesthetic into the greater and lesser palatine canal may cause the infection of this pterygopalatine fossa. So these are two greater and lesser palatine canals. Greater and lesser palatine. Next, so greater and lesser palatine. Now, the next communication, which is a big gap in front, this is the inferior orbital fissure, which communicates it with the orbit. Inferior orbital fissure. Naturally, when you see the pterygopalatine fossa as this gap between the pterygoid process and the posterior aspect of the maxilla, you can see that it communicates with the large space that is here, and this is this infratemporal fossa. The infratemporal fossa is here. So it's bordered by the zygomatic arch, and it's internally. And this pterygopalatine, which is this narrow gap, it communicates through the so-called sphenomaxillary fissure. Sphenomaxillary fissure is number 5. MX fissure. Number 6, we already spoke about it. It's a sphenopalatine foramen. It communicates the pterygopalatine fossa with the nasal cavity. Sphenopalatine foramen. And finally, 7 is actually the narrow gap that communicates the pterygopalatine fossa with the nasal cavity as well. We can see it here. It's just located between the so-called vaginal process of palatine bone and right here. This is so-called vomerovaginal vaginal canal. It's between the wing of the vomer and the vaginal process of the palatine.
Roll it enough.
Now it can be scary because of such a big number of these communications, but in fact, during these 5 years, you'll repeat that many times, especially in the course of the dental surgery. They generally ask about all these communications, so it's just repeated over and over again, just to memorize or learn by heart that these communications might be potential ways of spreading infections. And if you just administer inappropriately the drug into this greater or lesser palatine canal, this can spread into the pterygopalatine fossa, and then through the 6 remaining directions it can go. For instance, to eye, to the middle cranial fossa, to the infratemporal fossa, etc., etc., etc. So this is foramen rotundum. Of course, we have here also the canals for the greater and lesser petrosal nerves. And the posterior cranial fossa is mainly just the foramen magnum. Bilaterally, we have the foramen jugular foramen. We have the condylar canals and the hypoglossal canals. And then we have definitely the internal acoustic meatus. And this internal acoustic meatus is just the seat for the 8th cranial nerve and the 7th cranial nerve. But 8th, these 2 nerves run in 2 different directions. What does it mean? when you have the brainstem here, the eighth nerve goes from the hearing and balance receptors and it goes to the brainstem. So the eighth, it goes towards the brainstem. While the facial, because it exits from the brain and it goes to the muscles of facial expression, it goes outside. And the seventh nerve goes into this internal acoustic meatus, and then in the floor, I mean in the end of this internal acoustic meatus, there is one opening, which is the sort of inlet of the facial canal. The outlet of this facial canal is this stylomastoid foramen. So it looks that the nerves enter the internal acoustic meatus, that's the hole. So let it be the eighth nerve, that's the eighth. And this is let this be the seventh. So the seventh goes this way and the eighth goes this way. Now,